Hello and welcome to a special edition of the Storied Arcs podcast where we bring you another creator interview. This time, we get the privilege of speaking with Sarah Gailey, writer of Eat the Rich, Know Your Station, many novels, and some Buffy the Vampire Slayer comics, and the first standalone White Widow series at Marvel. We're very excited to bring you this interview, so please be sure to check the links in the description to subscribe to their newsletter and purchase their books and support them in every way that you can. Without any further ado, here is writer Sarah Gailey. What is your comic origin story? From the episodes we've discussed, people know that you began writing blogs and short stories, novels, and then added comics to the repertoire. And so I've kind of wanted to know, is it something that was just an opportunity that came along, or was comics kind of one of the goals from the get-go?
It's so funny. Both are true. I don't even know if I've talked about this before. I have talked elsewhere about the way I started writing comics professionally, which was at the kind of invitation and mentorship of an editor who he's no longer working in comics, but at the time he was an editor at Boom and was absolutely instrumental in building my confidence in my craft in comics writing. And he brought me on to write a Steven Universe IP to help me sort of understand that I could write comics. He was like, you can do this. And I was like, not only do I not know that I can write comics, I don't know that I can write for kids. Kids are so hard to write for because they have a certain level of, mental and emotional development, but also are so sensitive to condescension. If a kid catches a whiff of condescension, they're out. And I was like, I don't know if I'm cut out for this. And he was like, do this. And meanwhile, we will talk about your creator-owned pitch that you're working on. And that was how Eat the Rich happened. So in a way, comics was not a professional goal for me. It felt way too far out of reach. And I ended up being sort of shown that it wasn't as far out of reach as I thought. At the same time, I have always loved comics, and I recently discovered in my mom's house an old file folder with a comic that I drew when I was in 4th grade.
Wow.
Called The Adventures of Purple Dog. You're never going to guess what this character's thing is.
Purple, a dog that's purple, possibly.
Holy! How did you get it?
I was going to say, you have my daughter's attention.
I've read a lot of comics in my life. I'm pretty good at sussing these things out. Yeah.
His adventures were very anti-graffiti because I don't know quite what crime was. And my main understanding of it was from like Free Willy, where a kid does some graffiti and he has to become friends with an orca as punishment.
We used to be a country, didn't we? Jeez.
Yeah, I know. We got to go back.
I did have a birthday party as a child organized around seeing Free Willy in the theater. So
what a good birthday. Damn.
Let me tell you though, my mom had to have 2 tries at the cake. Homemade black icing doesn't taste great, so we ended up eating a very brown whale. So, the second try we had a brown whale, and then all of the like very young children were like, "That's not what color the whale is." It's like, all right, you little you want the black whale, have it.
Yeah.
And as the birthday king, you were like, I say it's the brown whale.
Yeah, I don't think I knew that I could throw my weight around like that on a birthday.
That's an understanding that comes with maturity.
Yeah.
Well, I was like, it was my birthday, but I was a middle child, so it's like offsetting.
Mm-hmm.
So anyway,
middle children only get a half of a birthday.
Yeah. Oh yeah. If that,
yeah.
We're not even going to bring up the time we picked our family pet while I was at baseball practice.
Wow.
I think they forgot I wasn't there in a family of 5, which is really tough.
That's brutal. It's
very Home Alone.
It was right after we had gone to the doctor and I'd taken an allergy test, and they were like, yeah, he's super allergic to cats. And then my older sister was like, but I really want a kitten. And so they went and picked one out when I had no say.
Says the guy who now has like a dozen cats in his house.
Yeah,
right?
no, I've embraced my, I was like, the body the body's code can be rewritten. If I expose myself to enough cats, I will adapt or die, and I've adapted. So I'm thriving now.
I'm glad it was the first one.
Well, uh, so you've had an interest in comics, even though that you kind of stumbled into it a little bit. So who are some of your comic influences? I'm particularly curious if the artist that I compare you to a lot is numbered among your influences.
Ooh, I'm interested, especially to be compared to an artist because I am not responsible for any of the art in my
Well,
comics.
I mean,
No
a
one
writer,
wants
yeah.
that. Nobody
No,
wants that from
this
me.
person, well, this person only writes, although occasionally will do his own variants, which I would imagine kind of look like the purple dog.
Probably. Man, that dog sure was purple though. I had something there and I need to bring it back. DC, call me. We can do something. We can do something gritty.
You
Oh,
want to
subscribed.
own it.
I'm
Yeah,
in.
you
Yeah,
want to
I'm
own
in.
it. Yeah. I think it sounds more like a dark horse, purple dog universe.
Yeah, well, a dark dog, if you will,
Yeah,
which is
absolutely.
just a horse with soft hooves. So my, I mean, my influences are varied, right? And I've loved comics for a long time, so I have like early influences. I was reading so much original Amazing Spider-Man. I would just read through the collection over and over again. And Blade of the Immortal, I stole from my big sister's shelf when I was far below the recommended reading age for that comic, and I was like, time to learn about the world. But I've also, for the last year and a half or so, I've been immersing myself pretty intensely in like a comics curriculum. Um, I I have been reading comics from a perspective of like general interest for a long time, but in this last year and a half, I was like, it's time for me to make sure that I know what people are talking about when I talk to comics people who are trying to share their craft, um, and their perspective on writing and art with me, which people very generously do. So, in this last year of reading, I've picked up some newer influences, newer to me, not new to the industry, who have completely changed the way that I write and are really impacting what I'm working on right now. So Mark Russell is like has
That's the
completely
one.
smashed my brain into smithereens. You compare me to Mark Russell?
Oh yeah. Oh yeah.
I'm gonna do something
We
bodily impossible. Are you?
Yeah.
Are we a
No,
swearing
every
podcast?
time if someone says they like Mark Russell, I'm like the little Clippy the paperclip. I'm like, I think you might also like Sarah Gailey.
Wow, that is the biggest compliment I can imagine getting.
I'm just glad.
I'm
Yeah,
very
I'm glad you read
emotional
Mark's
hearing
work.
this.
Okay, well, did you ever read
real quick,
Bunk
Mike,
Bed
sorry.
Mishaps,
Yeah.
which was his self-published journal of cartoons?
No.
Okay, you had to kickstart it, but
Okay, I'm taking a note.
yeah, no, I have it. It's incredible. He signed each copy and mailed them out, I think himself. But his art is hilarious. It's because he like wrote and illustrated the entire thing.
I would just say, I'll just say, Sarah, that Mike and I had not talked about that, but as soon as he said 3 minutes ago he was thinking of a creator that you reminded him of, Mark Russell was I was like, he's going to say Mark Russell. I'm almost positive. So so you can take that with full compliments. I think Mark Russell is a writer that Mike and I both, I think, absolutely adore, just for his ability to take like absurdist level satire, and have it be on that top level really absurd, and then have a next level where there's some like real social commentary, and then there's a next level that maybe it's just like a weird funny meta joke, and there's a next level below that that has real heart, and it's like there's so much going on there. And I think you see that throughout all of his books there, and I think something that Mike and I really grabbed onto when we read both Eat the Rich and Nerd Station is that I think we see a lot of those elements in there. So
well, to be fair,
to hear you say that you've been reading him and pulling influences from that, we're all on the same wavelength here, absolutely. So whatever you're tapping into there, and early on, and maybe what you think how it's influencing going forward, I think you're on a track there. We can see that as readers. So
wow. My rotten little heart is just reinflating from this. I'm
I
so
quoted
touched.
his letter that he wrote in the introduction to the Flintstones Deluxe Edition when we were talking about your book, because he says something about like if something's worth saying, it's worth saying loud, and the time for grad school subtlety is gone. And I was like, yeah, I think they're tapping into the same type of things here. And so our podcast typically will do one completed series, 3, 4, 6 volumes, whatever, and just do one trade paperback a week. With both Mark Russell and you, they're all one trade stories. So we took 2 one trade stories and then did like a comparison discussion. So for him, we
Oh,
did
cool.
Flintstones and Not All Robots. And for you, we've done Eat the Rich and Know Your Station.
Oh, that is so cool. His Snagglepuss. I didn't start reading him until after I had completed writing Their Station, and when I read his Snagglepuss, I
Yeah.
remember putting it down and thinking, this is the shit I want to be writing. This is the level I want to meet. He's incredible. He's incredible. Like, I don't have to tell you. And then I do want to, share another comics influence that again, I didn't start reading it until later, because everyone had told me how intense it was and how like, oh, you really have to brace yourself. And I was like, never quite in a place where I was like, I want to be bracing myself. And then finally this last year, I was like, it's time. And I just ripped through all of his work and was like, oh, this is what I want to be writing is Junji Ito.
Oh
Um,
yeah.
I had been kind of dodging around Junji Ito for a long time because I was like, everyone is telling me it's going to be really hard to read. And it's like, it kicks ass. It's so much fun to read. I think people need to kind of like grow up a little bit. Um, I can't share any details, but I will say that the like writing comps for the series that I'm about to dive into working on are Mark Russell meets Junji Ito, and I'm pretty stoked about
Well, first of
it.
all, yeah, I think we also said this about you and I think you might be the fastest person to reach this accolade from me, but you are a person who went from I've never heard of them, who is that, to I will buy anything they put their name on. And I don't think it took that long. I think I probably have 20 comic creators that I feel that way about, but most of them cultivated over a much longer period of time. Um, so yeah, and I hope
I definitely have not invested in your comics. I don't know.
You shoplifted all of them.
Yeah, no. These are just random books I pulled out of my
came
collection.
with the house.
Yeah, they came
They're
with the
they're load bearing comics. Um,
yeah, yeah. I don't have
That
any.
means
I don't
so
have.
much to me, Mike.
I don't have Buffy though because that felt disingenuous because I've not read Buffy. I'm not a Buffy. I've never seen Buffy or read any of the comics. My brother's a big Buffy fan. I think he's read most or all the expanded universe stuff there. So it would have felt disingenuous if I like went and bought a copy just there. I've got Eat the Rich here on my shoulder, Another Station. Also have White Widow, which we'll get to later. Books that I have actually read and very much enjoyed. So
Oh,
no,
those covers are so beautiful.
they're. I mean the
Jenny Frison is how I discovered your work.
one thing I know I've got the variants for both Eat the Rich #1 and No Station #1, which are done by Becca Carey, right? Yeah,
Yeah, we've got
and
Becca Carey,
yeah,
Jen Woodall, I think, and then White Widow has the art germ variants as well,
oh
and
yeah,
Kevin Tong, I think.
yeah. I've got Archer up there for White Widow there, but there's kind of like this minimalist kind of cover to them, and then those ended up being the covers for your trades. They actually use
Right.
those for the trades, which I think is really cool because I mean they're the Eat the Rich one is just like wildly evocative. You see that on a shelf, like you're stopping and taking a look at that. Well, we'll get to that there. So I, way you describe whatever this new comic is, which I guess that jumps down to the end. We talk about what you can or cannot tease. Sounds like you can't really tease it yet, but that right there seemed like a pretty good tease for the next thing you're working on. So no,
I hope so.
whatever that is, whenever that comes out, I think Mike and I will both be diving into it.
Yeah. Does it have a cat?
It can, but I don't think the cat will have a good time
Nope.
if there
Nope.
is.
Nope. You can't kill a cat.
I don't
Um,
think you want a cat in there. Well,
Yeah.
actually, hang on a second, because I could have the cat actually have a great time, and that would be worse.
yeah. Well, I was gonna say a
Okay,
lot
now
of
I'm
All
Ito's
more
right,
work.
intrigued.
hang on. I'm taking notes. I have a good idea.
Yeah, I was like, a lot of Ito's work has cats in it, which is
Mhm.
I go to the manga shop in my neighborhood, and they know that I'm like a crazy cat person, so they're always like they sold me on
Anything with a cat.
Night of
Anything with a
the
cat.
yeah, they sold me on Night of the Living Cat last year, which was a Night of the Living Dead horror story. But instead of turning into like a zombie or something, people were turning into cats.
Oh,
But the
fun.
cats were so cute that people knew they had to stay away. But as soon as they saw one, they were like, "Oh, I think I could just pet it once." And it's like all of society crumbles in this way.
This
And
was written by a person who is allergic to cats and who understands what that life is like.
yeah,
Clearly. Yeah,
yeah,
clearly. Yeah.
more than likely. So anyway, we started talking about Eat the Rich, so we might as well dive in a little bit there. There's a lot that could be said. I think it's almost too on the nose to say, I detect some Get Out in the plot of that book. Um, but at the end of the book, there's this spark of revolution, which is what we're kind of waiting for, and I love that the main character goes through this complex journey of by like issue 3 has sold out and is like, well, I guess I could live this way. It's not so bad. And you start to see like the rationalization. And then at the end, um, you get this underclass uniting and revolting. And then the book ends. Like you can feel what the next 10 pages are, but they aren't there. And so I have like my theories as to why this would be the case. But can you talk about the choice of how to end it there, why to end it there?
Yeah. I don't think anyone has asked me this question before, and I'm extremely excited to get to talk about this because that was a very deliberate choice to end it there. Um, for two reasons. The first reason is that this story is very much the story of an individual. In Eat the Rich, we are really focused on Joey and her uh, personal journey of like understanding the way of the world and the shape of the world and the nature of class. It's not the story of an entire society. This isn't a Les Mis story. We're not getting to see in-depth looks at every single level of culture. And I don't feel that it makes a lot of sense to have excuse me, to have a revolution story that is based in the individual because that's not how societal change works. That's not how revolution works. There's this like white middle class fantasy of the revolution being led by one guy who goes, "We're going to change everything." And that's just not how this kind of thing works. Um, the other reason I didn't want to show an entire revolution is because I don't write didactic literature. I write work that often has class and social commentary in it and that often has observations about culture and society. But I'm not interested in writing books that say, here's the answer, here's how you make it all right, and here's how you live in a good and virtuous way. I think that that kind of literature is actively dangerous, and the people who seek it out end up being some of the most dangerous people in our society. And so I wasn't interested in writing a comic that says, here's the solution. I was interested in writing a comic that said, here's what happens when people break. When people have had enough, bad things happen to the people who have made them have enough. And it's kind of up to the reader whether or not they think that is a good thing or a bad thing, whether they think that's a solution to a problem or just creates more problems. Um, I prefer to leave that kind of thing, hopefully, for my readers to chew on and decide and think about and discuss instead of me handing them a little pellet of
Right.
moralist information.
Yeah, no, that's really good. And it actually makes me feel better about the way that I interacted with the ending of Know Your Station because I think Alex and I may have differed on this one, but I think I was like, yeah, I'm glad they like, they had their little revolution revolt or whatever, but now it seems like they've just chosen a new master. And I'm like,
Yeah.
I guess they moved up one tick because it's now the master of their choosing rather than the master of by default. but they are still just looking to fall in line somewhere. And I think that actually is the symptom of people in captivity, is like you can give them freedom, you can liberate them, and they don't always even know how to move forward without some dictatorial entity, whether it's rich people or AI or whatever. So that was how that was my uneasiness at the end of Know Your Station. Not all of the body horror artwork. I had gotten pretty desensitized to that by the end of the first issue.
I mean, I love this line of thought that you have here, because like the top secret of a lot of my class commentary writing is that a lot of it is about the horror of liberal ideals of revolution and change. I am quite far to the left of most American liberals, and I see a lot of them expressing their ideas of change, and their ideas of change are just put new boots on the same system.
Right.
And so a lot of the endings of the social commentary that I write in my short fiction and my longer fiction and in my comics is the horror of those new boots, and saying, sure seems like we're just doing the same thing over again and saying that it's triumph. And I'm very tickled that you had that interpretation.
Okay, well, that's a win for Mike. Normally when we have these interviews,
tickled does not mean it was a correct interpretation. Tickled means amused. So I may be a fool in this conversation.
Take the win there. Most times we've had these conversations, we've been lucky enough to talk to the creators, and there's some sort of theory about what the book is about or underlining meaning or whatever. Basically, I've batted 1,000. Like, I've never been wrong. Like, every time we talk to creator, they've come on my side there. So this one goes to Mike here.
Alex, I want to know what L you think you're taking.
Well, I don't think it was a matter of at least specifically with Know Your Station. I think the idea of I guess I didn't see it so much as like, in the end there, Lisa and Marin and all them have like just taken on a new master there. I think maybe I put a little more stock into the idea of choice, in that, okay, yes, maybe all we've now done is put this AI in control, and I guess we're good as long as the AI stays aligned with us, and if the AI flips, then we're all kind of screwed. But I think I put a little more stock into them making an active choice as opposed to opting into a system that gave them no choice. Here, at least, they were the ones choosing this system versus being a part of it. I think I put a little more stock into that than Mike did. But
I think I then quoted the second Matrix movie at you, which I think is always a mistake. But
I can see that now. I can see how what you're saying, because I think that maybe applies a little more what you're saying there, Sarah, to Eat the Rich, because in the end, like, one little community is potentially changed, right? But we saw the reach of this whole larger community of out in the world, and these people here, of which Crestview Bless like represents a small portion of, like, they're still out there in the world. They're all over in all manners of society. So like nothing has changed in the larger world from what happens in their story. Like you said, it's a very personal story. It's a journey of one person, really one person in this one location. And it's like Joey's they're gonna be good. All the help there, they're gonna be good as long as they pretty much stay right there. But is there any idea of them going out and doing and overthrowing everything? Like you said, that's not what the book's about. The book isn't about them trying to then, okay, let's take this idea and take down everybody. Let's go down and over the entire system. They seem pretty content to be like, listen, we've taken over this place here, and we're good now. And so, yeah, does that equal revolution? Does that equal change at all? Or have you simply just, change the things for yourself? The larger structures of society, the problems that you're commenting on here, like, they all still exist. Like, nothing really has changed for anybody else. It's just the journey of one person here. And
Exactly,
is that a win? is it a win for her? Is it a win at all in the larger sense? So I think I like that ambiguity, and I like hearing you talk about saying that that's really the point. That it's not about moralizing. You're obviously commenting on a broken system and saying, and being very pointed about that, being very pointed specific. Like, here are the ways things are broken. But yeah, you're not saying, but I know how to fix it. Like, you're not saying, listen to me. I know how to fix it. I know how to make it better. It's simply just, this is what happens when you live in a system like this. And
exactly, yeah.
when you look at a world like the system you're showing is, I mean, hopefully we're not eating people. But
one hopes.
At this point, I have no idea. But in general, the larger sense, the larger
it is
metaphor,
an election year. Yeah.
Listen, one day at a time. We do our best.
Baby steps.
I will also say, Alex, I don't think that your thoughts about the end of Know Your Station are wrong either, because both of you are discussing whether or not these people have put St. Bridget in control.
Mm-hmm.
And I think both of you are also talking about the way that they engage with her in a very hierarchical sense. And I wonder if there's room for both of your interpretations in an idea of this story in which there's a collaboration that one hopes won't evolve into control, but can't know what the outcome will be. When you're dealing with, a very powerful being who controls your every breath in outer space, you want to have a friendship and a collaboration and equal sense of power in that dynamic. Can that equality really exist between the two of you is for the reader's imagination.
Sure. Yeah. I mean, and it did seem like St. Bridget was totally prepared to have that type of symbiotic relationship, but it was a matter of whether the humans even knew how to function with that level of dignity because they'd so internalized their station, which I was taking as like a very Austinian, like Dickensian 19th century English talking about station, like, your station in life and not being able to ascend or something like that. So that when I first read the title, that was what grabbed me, and I was looking for that. So I was a little primed from the title.
I want to, before we leave and really kind of get into the station, I wanted to talk a little bit about the process of Eat the Rich. I mentioned here one of my favorite parts of Eat the Rich are the panels in which you have text in the panels that's outside of narration boxes and text boxes and word balloons. Something that Mike and I talked about when we discussed the book. I love a visual trick like that because that's something you could only do in comics. Like you can get away with it maybe in animation or something like that, where you just have like text on the screen, but it works so well on the page. And I think the way that it was used in Eat the Rich is fantastic to get, because we have narration boxes, so we already know what Joey's thinking at times, but then to see the text outside of that, just in the panel, gives us an extra layer of either what she's feeling, what she's thinking. It adds so much more to the character beyond just what the words actually say. Simply their visualization on the page gives us insight into that. So I'm curious, was that something that you had? Was that written in the script? Like, had you visualized that, something that you wanted to do, or is that something that as you're kind of working with the full art team and all that evolved later into the story?
That was absolutely in the script. I am such a hand lettering junkie. I am like, I understand the need for like digital computerized lettering in comics, but I have my little heart is so devoted to hand lettering and to the amazing things you can do with it. I love bringing the words into the art, bringing the art into the words. Like I love the way that those two things can unify. And so that was all over the script. Pius was amazing.
No, sorry, that was my question. So that was art. That was Pius Bach doing that actual art, not that wasn't Cardinal with a letterer working on that way. That was built in. So I guess before going to the lettering phase, those texts were drawn in.
Right. So cool. All of the letters that are part of the art, like the words on Joey's shirt, and those letters that are in the panel were all part of the art. Cardinal is incredible on letters. I love working with Cardinal on letters, and they bring so much adventurous and like visually fascinating dimension to their letters. I don't want to undersell that at all. Every time I've gotten to work with Cardinal, the letters have been like top tier. And they've also been on board for every weird thing that I want to do with letters and bubbles. But I got really spoiled with Eat the Rich because I was like, hey, what if we do this thing? And then I'd write this thing in the script that would be completely deranged. Like the words "it tasted okay" being this like huge, overwhelming thing in the panel that like frames Joey's entire experience. And everybody was like, yeah, great, let's do it. And it made something so gorgeous. I can't believe how lucky I got with that they were willing and able to pull that off.
Yeah, that's really great. I said it did that panel. I think that was that a full page spread. I think her at the table
I think it's
there.
a splash, yeah.
Yeah, I think it was a full splash there. The one that I really enjoyed and I mentioned in Mike and I discussion is later in probably in issue 4 or 5 there, after Joey has tried to assimilate through and she goes down to the beach and it's is it Petal? I'm sorry, I forget. Yeah, Petal. So she sits down next to her and basically is like she can tell something's wrong and can ask her what it is. And then there's a panel where Joey looks exasperated and it just says everything that happened all summer. and then the next panel is Petal reacting to this, which you assume was just like a massive like 15-minute diatribe, just like word vomit out of Joey's mouth. And what I loved about that is we the reader, we don't need to be retold it. We don't need to recount everything. We know this already. So it's actually not important the specific words that she's saying there. And the other way I can picture this panel, and I've seen it done before, is maybe like a giant word balloon with just like a block of text, right? No spaces, no punctuation. The words actually run like beyond what you can see in the word balloon, just to show you it just here's a whole bunch of words. And it gives the reader this idea. You don't know what she says, but you know what she's saying. And it's interpreted of that. In this moment, it's not important what she's saying. It's the fact that she can say it to Petal, that Petal's the one person that Joey can just unload on and be open with versus everyone else in the higher society there. And so I said one of those tricks that I love where you said you don't have to waste time recapping all this. You don't have to put all that text in there. You can have this one panel with these words here in a way and deliver what the character is feeling and what the situation is in a way that you can really only do in comics. And I said, I love seeing something like that. I love hearing that it's actually part of the art too. I think one thing we mentioned was in Saga, I know Phonographics does all of their letters for Brian K. Vaughan and Fiona Staples, but anytime there's text on the page, any of the narration, the handwritten stuff, that's all Fiona Staples. That's all part of the art there. So that's why I was curious, and I'm glad you specified that it was Pius. One question we don't have here, but I'm curious, with both Pius and eventually with Liana, how did you get hooked up with them? Was that just through Boom? Was that through the editors there in terms of finding their art? Because I know I knew Pius's art at Boom because I had read the various stories out of the Magicians kind of expanded universe from Lev Grossman. So I was familiar with his name and knew he had done some stuff with Boom. So was he just someone that was kind of in their stable and had worked with that you just kind of got paired with and went off? Is that how it worked? Or was there something that you kind of saw in either one of their art that you felt would work well with the story you were telling?
It's a little both. So for both of these series, I was working with incredibly brilliant editors. For Eat the Rich, I was working with the editor who ended up bringing me into comics, Matt, and he connected me with Pius and basically said, I think this will be a good fit. And I said, I trust your judgment. I don't think that I know enough to know more than you on the subject, so I would love to work with Pius. And then for Know Your Station, I was working with Elizabeth Bry, who is an incredible, brilliant editor, very responsible for pushing my work on Know Your Station to the level that it ended up being at. And Elizabeth said, I think you should work with this person, Liana, and did it in a very diplomatic way. Said, here are 3 different artists. Here's this one, here's this one, here's this one. Here are my thoughts on all of them. And Liana was a clear frontrunner there. And I remember saying, here are my thoughts on these other 2. And Elizabeth being like, you want to work with Liana? And I am so glad that she said that. I'm so glad that I listened because I have ended up meeting such a brilliant professional collaborator and such an amazing friend through that process. And Liana pushed the book to be better at every single turn. We ended up collaborating quite closely. And I'm just so glad that we did.
I think I guess knowing nothing about the two of yours history there, but when we spoke to Liana and asked her about that, they said the same thing of like, yeah, an editor put them together, and it I was shocked by that because some say the book reads like these are two people who had maybe met at a con or something and talked, hey, I got this idea for a book. And yeah, we're talking about it forever, and then it finally gets made. It felt like it grew out of something like that versus the relatively anodyne, probably pretty standard of like, oh, the writer has a pitch and the editor goes, well, I think these are, and that's how it gets paired. And then something magical comes from that, which happens. I mean, that's a story I've heard from a lot of creators of like, these people who have worked together and, for multiple books. And, well, how'd you guys meet? It's like, well, he got put on this book for me, one of Mike and I's favorite writers is Tom King, and
I love Tom King.
One of his frequent collaborators now is Mitch Gerrits. And the story of how they got working together was because Tom had Sheriff of Babylon. He was kind of a story quasi told about his time as a working overseas in Iraq and Afghanistan. And they hired Mitch because Mitch had just done The Activity and The Punisher. So it was like, he's the military guy. He can draw guns. And so that's when they got together and they start talking. You realize, oh, wait, this guy also wants to draw weird superhero stuff, And so from there, and then they start doing it, and you see the stuff that they've done on Batman, Mr. Miracle, Strange Event, all these crazy books here. But it starts because we need a guy who can draw military stuff accurately. And so we just happen to get this guy. And it turns out that, those guys are, I was just at WonderCon, MegaCon down in Orlando, and the two of those guys had a panel talking. It was called The World According to Tom King, but it was Tom and Mitch there, and it was just 45 minutes of those guys just like basically busting each other's balls. It was just them just like cracking jokes at each other. It was hysterical. It was so funny, and you think like this only happened because of a specific comic book pitch that an editor was like, "Well, I know a guy who can almost." Irrespective of what the story was, I know a guy who can draw the physical things this book needs to look like, and yet that turns into something much greater. And so I said, I read something like Know Your Station, and I would have guessed it was something like you guys had met, and it was like, I got this idea for a book, and then you work on it, and then it gets pitched. So to find out that it was an editor had an eye, say, I think this would be good here, and to get that pairing, and to see what it came to, I think shows to, Mike and I oftentimes have questions like, what do editors really do, especially on independent books? And we know that can cover a wide range of things, but to know that sometimes it's like pairing, it's like, talent identification and saying this could work great with this artist, this writer, whatever. And when it comes together like that, I think it's pretty great. So yeah.
It's amazing. I mean, I have to credit Elizabeth Bry with so much. As the editor, she ended up picking up editing Eat the Rich when Matt left, and then also edited, of course, Know Your Station. And she and I have worked together on a couple of other things. And she has been instrumental for me in helping me learn with every single script that I write how to better serve the other members of my team with my script. Because the writer of a comic is the first person to touch the story. Right. And so is the first person to pick up the script and put ideas into it. And the writer puts all of the information into it that the other members of the team are going to need, and doesn't see what happens when the other members of the team pick up that script because it's down the line. And by then you're already working on another script. And there's very rarely communication that flows backward through that process to say like, hey, it would be really helpful for the flatter if you could put time of day in your script at every section that the time of day changes. Or it would be really useful for the colorist if you could indicate like tone shifts between scenes because they're working with light and shadow in ways that change between scenes. It would be really useful for the letterer if you could indicate where you want font size to be communicating volume. Or it would be really helpful for the letterer if you would arrange your dialogue order in a way that's going to make it so that the balloons don't have to cross each other. like that information doesn't flow back upstream to the writer. And so Elizabeth has given me so much of her time and wisdom by telling me when I look at a panel and be like, I'm not satisfied with this panel, I want changes on it. She'll be like, this happened because you did this stuff in the script. And then I get to be like, oh, I'm making the job of the other people on my team so much harder. Liana has done this too. Liana has taught me so much about what happens after I hand off the script and what it looks like to redraw a panel. You know, I will see a panel and go, this facial expression's not right. And it's like, okay, is that something you can fix in a script pass? Because here's how much time you're asking of the artist when you ask for a redraw on a facial expression. Liana hasn't said those exact words to me. Liana's very, very nice to me. But it's even beyond the immense amount of influence over the story and the immense amount of internal advocacy for marketing and package design that my editors provide, I've just learned so much from them, and especially Elizabeth.
I love hearing that. I love hearing the inside baseball stuff that and the things like that, or that as a reader you would never think about in terms of like time of day. Like, why does that matter if you're well? It matters to someone in terms of it's going to show on the page. If things are inconsistent or don't make sense, you're going to pick up on it, and you're probably not going to know why. It's not going to look right, and as a reader, you're going to see it, and you're not going to understand why it doesn't feel right, but it's not going to feel right. And it's those little things like that of understanding that you can start that process in the beginning and have it. You said about flowing in one direction there. So I love hearing that inside stuff about the things we don't think about. I think people think often writers is just you're writing dialogue, and obviously that's a big part of comics there. But some of my favorite books are silent issues. I love a silent issue because I think it's my favorite gimmick in comics overall. Love a silent issue. Talk about, well, what the writer doing that? The writer get paid for that. I know the writer did a lot there because they're doing all the description there and little things like that about understanding a facial expression. Something as simple as that can be communicated in what you put in there. Because you're right. I think it's easier to change some words than it is to change a whole panel or a whole page of someone. Yeah, I can see how that might be. Can we make that a script change? Can you maybe tweak that a little bit? But I love hearing all that. That's fantastic. Thank you.
All right. So my next question has to do with really all your work, but particularly I finished Magic for Liars last week, and we've done a couple reads now and Know Your Station just to go through it in the podcast. And there's the thing that connects, I think, most with me. Obviously, I'm a real sucker for social commentary, whether it's you or Mark Russell or whomever. But there's a very particular type of world building that you employ. And I get frustrated with like fantasy and sci-fi when I have to sit down and read an encyclopedia first. It's like, look, I'm proud of you. You did all this. That's great. But you shouldn't have to pause storytelling in order to world build. And you have just like walked that line so perfectly. But it almost seems like you write more world building than you even need for storytelling. Because in both cases, those are functionally mysteries by genre. But in one case, Know Your Station, we can surmise something catastrophic has happened on Earth, presumably environmentally related. And, everyone's in these colonies, and you get maybe like a 3-page introduction, and then bam, you're in the story. And in Magic for Liars, you get the protagonist kind of giving like a drunken recount at a bar to the bartender about like, here's how magic works in this world. And then it's like, I shouldn't have talked about those things. And the rest you discover, but there are like all these different departments of magic, and there's mechanics on how the magic works and things like that, where it's like somebody could like camp out there and write 10 books. And you've chosen to do single stories in both cases. So I'm just curious, what goes into your world building? What drives you to do it? Is it all based around the story and the story needs, or do you really enjoy world building for the sake of it?
Oh gosh, I mean, again, both are true. So on brand for me to be like, I have both. Uh, I I love world building for the sake of world building. I think it's fun as hell. Over at my newsletter, Stone Soup, I ran a series for a year called Build and Beyond that was all about world building, and it was just inviting other creatives to come and do a little quick world building exercise every week. That was based on a silly prompt, and people took it amazing places to expand a whole world out of one idea. Like the idea that everyone is born with a mask attached to their face and what happens when yours comes off. Um, and the whole focus of that was that world building is fun as hell. It's something that we naturally do as people. We're constantly building worlds in reality and in our minds and imaginations. At the same time, um, in my writing, all of my world building is story informed. Before I was a writer, I had a background in theater, and in the school of acting that I was part of, one of the most important things about building your performance is being able to answer every single question about why your character does the things they do. So, like, if your character, I don't know, has an aversion to mustard, you have to be able to answer the question, what kind of mustard do they not like? Have they always disliked mustard? Do they ever try it to see if maybe they like it again? What do they do if they're in a situation where they have to eat it? What do they do if they're in a situation where they can turn it down, but there will be consequences? How dedicated are they to this dislike? Is it part of their personality? Even if that's all just informing a scene where someone offers them mustard and they say, ugh, no, thank you. You have to be able to know all the answers to those questions in order to inform your performance. And I bring that into my books. So, if like right now I'm working on this wretched novel that has been plaguing me and destroying my happiness for the last 5 years. And it takes place on an island, and the people on the island have to be able to eat. And there's a scene where there's butter. And so I'm like, okay, so where does this butter come from? But they have a goat. What does the goat eat? Okay, so it has to eat the detritus from the garden. How does the goat get to the detritus from the garden? And what do people feel about that? Like, is there conflict between the people who manage the garden and the person who's in charge of the livestock? Who is in charge of milking the goat? Do they hate the goat, or are they best friends with the goat? What do the kids on the island think about the goat? Because that's a charismatic but very stinky and mean animal. And I've got all these questions I'm asking myself in order to answer the question, what does it mean for someone to eat this butter? If you give someone something with butter on it on this island, what are you saying to them? And like the reader probably isn't going to give a shit about that. The reader's probably going to be like, butter, next page. But I want to be able to answer those questions, at least for the sake of the story.
To be
for
clear,
yourself, yeah.
If you wrote a 100-page short story and the first chapter was, character one gives character two a slice of buttered bread, and the next 99 pages we're understanding what that means, I would read that. I think it is.
I would love to do that. My editor keeps being like, "Can you stop doing this?"
Yeah, editors I think are inclined to say, like, how much can we shave away and the story still works. And by the way, this is just another comparison I made, recommendation. So I don't know if you'll feel as favorably about this one, but a novel writer, Becky Chambers.
I love Becky Chambers.
I was like,
I mean, I love their work and I love them as a person.
Yeah,
absolutely
a little
incredible.
more optimistic, upbeat. But I think you have very similar approaches to material. Like I read the Monk and Robot things last summer, and I was like so into the solar punk, which is like an underdone genre, and like learning about the characters and the world at the same time. Like, the two characters are kind of walking hand in hand, but so is the narrative and the world building. And that in, The Long Way to a Small Angry Planet, the stowing away on the ship, I got confused for a second when I started reading Know Your Station. I was like, wait, this isn't part of that. I was like, because I had just started that book. So it was like, wait, no, I have two characters on ships. They're like servant class, trying to like, fake their way up the ladder. So anyway, yeah, if someone is listening and has read Sarah Gailey, but not Becky Chambers, absolutely read Becky Chambers. If you've read Becky Chambers, but are somehow halfway through a Sarah Gailey interview and haven't read Sarah Gailey, then read Sarah Gailey.
Well, can I tell you, I got to interview Becky, oh my gosh, must have been 2 years ago now, for a book event. And we talked about this thing that has stuck with me ever since, that is deeply relevant to all my work, that I think I probably brought into Know Your Station a bit. I was talking with her about the way that we have like an internalized capitalist notion that humans should be like hive workers and should always be just working for the well-being of the company or of the economy, and that it's our duty to expend our bodies in this effort of labor. And I was saying something along the lines of like, people aren't insects. We are apex predators. We're persistent predators. We need to take naps. We need to lie down. We need to rest. And Becky goes, well, I'm an apiarist, and I'm going to tell you something you don't know about bees. Because bees, the beehive is like this constant metaphor for labor, right? There's beehives on all the signs in
It's
Utah
the
because
metaphor.
the Mormon church is like, you should be like a bee in the hive. You should be committed to the whole.
Oh,
And she
please
goes,
tell me you're about to invert that on them.
I'm an apiarist. And something that people don't know about bees is that bees get sleepy. They don't have eyelids, so you can't see their eyelids drooping when they're sleepy, but their antennae start to droop when they're sleepy. And if they get sleepy while they're in the hive, they climb into a pile of other bees and take a nap. And if they get sleepy when they're out in the world, they'll climb inside of a flower and take a nap. So if you look inside a flower and there's a bee just chilling in there, it got sleepy. And when bees get sleepy, they take a nap. They don't push themselves to keep working. They don't commit themselves to labor. They don't think, I'm part of the hive in the whole and I need to expend my body for this purpose. They think, I'm sleepy. I'm going to rest. And
Goals. Seriously.
I have been thinking about that nonstop, at least once a day ever since.
Yeah. I mean, I've been thinking about a nap since I turned 30. A daily nap. But it's nice to know that I'm more bee-like than I realized. Yeah, and I think that's probably a more apt understanding than the latest Jason Statham movie conveys.
I can't believe you would accuse a Jason Statham movie of not having deep insights into the nature of the human condition.
It may. It is called The Beekeeper, and the tagline is "Protect the Hive," but it looks like it's just him shooting people.
On behalf of the bees.
I need to ask Becky.
Yeah,
he's shooting people with a gun that shoots bees.
Do bees just ever go postal?
Yeah, do they snap at all? I don't know.
I mean, there were the murder hornets in 2020. That was part of the.
Oh,
yeah, but they're hornets though. Those aren't
Lamb
bees,
dunked
right?
me into a time machine with that phrase.
Yeah,
oh my gosh.
Someone I just heard said, 2019, that was 2 years ago, right? But 2020 was like 30 years ago, like that. Which I heard that, I was like, oh boy, that lands hard. Yeah. So I want to go back to what you're talking about world building, because and about specifically about the butter. I don't want to harp on the butter too much here, but it leads into the next question I have. Yeah, the leads
to
next
love
question.
To harp on the butter.
The question I have here was when we spoke to Liana, we asked them about a specific panel in Know Your Station, a cast splash page. That was just I found just generally hysterical. It's when Elise and Marin walk into one of the uber rich residences, and they see all of the possessions that this couple have, and including like a Peloton or exercise bike that's like encased in plexiglass, bunch of stuff framed on the wall, including a poster for Hamilton, the never forget commemorative 9/11 surfboard, which was fantastic. The Dare Christmas sweater. Other things, that there was the painting of what the Ronald Reagan in front of a volcano and things like that. And as we showed the panel, as we were talking about it, they went and pulled up your script and they read the panel description for that. And every single one of those things was specifically listed out on there. And so my question was going to be like, were those just inside jokes for you, things that were funny? Did they have deeper meaning? But now that when you've talked about this idea of world building and you've put this thought into how does this remote island even have butter? My question expands now of like, did you put thought into all of these items? Because I'll tell you first, the way that I read it was the uber rich people, like I think it starts off like with the one lady who loses her necklace, right? And she mentions it has a piece of the Challenger shuttle on it. And then we see this other resonance that has all this random stuff from our world, from Earth, where they no longer live on. And the way that I read it was these rich people have no connection to these items. And it's not about what they are. It's simply that they have possessions. Because we see like Elise's room, and it's on a spaceship, right? So it's very bare and austere. There's a bed, sink, there's a mirror, there's a tub. That's all you have. And the fact that I think it was Marin who says that they are the only ones who even have personal bathrooms. So the idea of that all the other staff has a communal bathroom. So the fact that they just have this bare bathroom is a luxury for them as staff. So you go into these residences, and the fact that they just own stuff, anything that they have possession and can display it, that's the way that I read it was that's the sign of wealth. But there's no specific connection to these items. But do you have a story for these, especially knowing that you wrote that room, that scene specifically with all those things, and it wasn't like just a Dare sweater; it was a Dare Christmas sweater, like that level of specificity. So I'm curious: are these just inside jokes for you, or were these things that
or is that in the room like right behind you? Is that just a depiction of your
yeah, that's actually just my living room. It's based on a photograph.
If you owned a commemorative 9/11 never forget surfboard, and that's not displayed behind you at all times, I'd be incredibly disappointed.
I hope that I make it big enough in comics that someone will manufacture for me a fiberglass 9/11 never forget commemorative surfboard.
That would be incredible. Did you make up stories for yourself in terms of why these people would have these certain items, or is it just something that you found funny on your own?
I mean, I'm gonna stay on brand and tell you it's both. So each of these items is significant. It's mentioned in the script that the people who own that suite have the largest collection of war era memorabilia anywhere. And the war era is the era that we currently live in. It is the era between the end of the Cold War and whenever the hell we, the United States, stopped trying to completely obliterate every brown person on this planet for purposes of profit. It's also the era of the prison industrial complex, which we live in now, and which there's a lot to be said about when that starts, but I start referencing it in this panel with the gigantic tribute to Ronald Reagan. Yeah. Every item in that home, with the possible exception of, I think that we put in a wall of Furbies, and that might have just been
there's like a shadow box and there's a Furby and a teddy bear, which I just assumed was like a Teddy Ruxpin, maybe.
Yeah, a Teddy Ruxpin. Yeah.
Okay. Yeah.
That was, I think, mostly just for fun and for us, for our little memories. But every other item in that room is connected to the idea of a future celebration of the current era that we're in and the way that both American Republican and American Democratic neoliberal policy reinforces the era that we're in. Both of those parties, both the Republicans and the Democrats in the US, are highly invested financially and publicly in war and in imprisoning people en masse and selling their labor extremely cheaply to profit large companies. So I could have put, a framed Victoria's Secret bra. Those are made with prison labor. I could have put a framed SodaStream. Those are made with West Bank labor and are highly exploitative. I could have put any Microsoft product, but I think those would have been visually too non-specific. The Hamilton poster is immediately recognizable. I don't know if I'm going to get sued for saying that it's a Hamilton poster because we were like, it's a non-specific poster. It could be anything. Glamilton.
I don't think it has text on it. If I don't have it pulled up here.
I don't think so because
I think
don't.
it's just the visual of an amorphous person standing on top
it might
of
be
what
an
would
Aaron
have
Burr
been.
poster. I don't know.
Yeah.
Listen, Lin-Manuel has Disney lawyers now. I don't need that heat.
That's
Yeah,
true.
that's true.
That's right.
I don't want to wake up in the night with the mouse standing over me going,
that's a big heavy now. Yeah.
It's over for you.
Yeah. So the poster that is potentially reminiscent of Hamilton, we'll refer to it that way.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Is a reference to the way that a lot of liberal and neoliberal people during this time period have celebrated the idea of a country built on ideals, and that it's important that we uphold those ideals and celebrate them. And also, isn't it fun to go spend a huge amount of money to go and witness those ideals being played out for you on a stage in a way that makes you feel like you are doing something important, while still, for example, voting for policies that enslave people all around the world. And of course, a little more obvious is the Dare Christmas sweater.
Yeah.
And this is the one where, you had asked if this is just a joke for me that makes me laugh or has a story. The story behind it is obviously this is a reference to the American War on Drugs. The Dare program was used to indoctrinate American children, including myself, into the so-called war on drugs by saying, hey, if you touch weed, you're evil. Also, if you go to a mostly white school, do you want to see the inside of a cop car? And the cop will come and smile at you and say nice things to you. And then you'll be like, oh, cops are good. So that's why it's a Dare sweater. The reason it's a Dare Christmas sweater is because I thought that would be funny.
Okay.
So with each of these items,
okay, I was wondering if there was a specific I'm glad to know that one incorporates both. The Dare obviously said I'm a child of that program as well. I don't know, Mike. Mike's a few years younger than me. Did you have Dare in school?
I went to the whitest school available, so yes, it was.
Yeah.
I had Dare.
Okay, all right.
Yep.
It was still going on.
A cop came into the class and said, "Don't worry, I won't arrest you."
Yes, no, I think that was actually on the shirt.
So that's what every single item in that room is, a specific reference with a joke on top of it. So the 9/11 commemorative surfboard is a joke about the way the United States has fetishized the events of September 11th, 2001 in order to justify killing and brutalizing and destroying communities around the globe. And then I was sitting at my desk and I remember being like, what's the funniest context for that? And I was going through my childhood memories of 9/11 commemorative plates and 9/11 commemorative car wraps and 9/11 commemorative sausage collections. And when I hit upon surfboard, I was like, oh, there's nothing better than that. And that's just because I think that combination is funny.
that is a better answer than I could have possibly imagined for that. That again, something that works on multiple levels. That it is going back to what we said when we talked about how reading your work reminds both of us of reading someone like Mark Russell. The idea that there is something absurdly funny about seeing a surfboard that says "never forget" on it, and just visually that can't not be funny. It just is. It is. Now that you've mentioned the things you were going through in your mind, I don't know what would be funnier. There maybe there might be, but the idea just a surfboard is hysterical. But then seeing it in context with everything else there and hearing all of that and understanding what the essence of the thing is important, and then the actual specifics are just funny. That kind of idea working on multiple levels is I said that's a better answer than I could have possibly hoped for. I on some level in my mind it was just going to be, you were just going to say, listen, this stuff's just funny to me. But to know that it is both that and also a continuation of the commentary, a continuation of the of sitting with the larger ideas in the book and all of that. The fact that you can blend those together is great. So what kind of, I don't know if Mike, do you remember when we talked to Liana about this, did they mention what they thought when they read that panel? Because I think you and I were just blown away that it was so specific, and we were really focused on the specificity of, wow, Sarah really wrote that into the script. Did Liana talk about what they thought in terms
Don't
of
recall off the
yeah.
top of my head, but we are coming up on an hour, or I think we've just passed an hour. So I do want to give Sarah a chance to duck out. I think we have like one more question after this.
Yeah,
but
I
totally
do
want to respect your schedule.
Sure, yeah.
I can hit one more. It's no problem.
Yeah,
Just, by the way, I did go down the rabbit hole while you were talking, Alex, of Googling 9/11 Memorial Gift Shop. And
there's a surfboard.
There's not a surfboard, but there is this tote bag.
Okay, how is this 9/11 memorial?
Of the rescue dogs.
Rescue dogs.
And I was just like, oh, I think if I just send Sarah this link, we'll get a whole nother comic series.
Yeah.
Like, just write a 6-issue thing on the rescue dogs.
Oh, and here's the thing, man.
There were 6 dogs on that tote bag, so there's one issue each right there.
Yeah, you get Otto's issue and Everest's issue and Annie's issue, and
boom, it's there.
The depth of that day provided such a bottomless well of material for propaganda. And I'm still amazed by the creativity of the propagandists who picked it up.
It is wild to look back on that time and specifically on that aspect, that commercialization of people of all manner of thinking with good intention and maybe trying to do good, and people like, I can make a quick buck here. Like, they're like, everyone is in that pot right there. And you're right, the stuff that came out of it in the moment, I think you get so blinded by the event and you're wrapped up in it. But then if you're able to take just like a half step back and look back and see the whole picture, it's like a forest of the trees thing. You're like, we're all insane. Like, right. Like, none of us, like, none of this is right. None of this is well. Everyone here has a problem. And it is wild to look back on and see something like that. And I'm actually like now kind of shocked that there wasn't like a surfboard. Like, I'm sure someone has one, right? Someone had to have gotten one.
Well, those are limited edition. Yeah.
Maybe so. Maybe,
there were probably multiple race cars. I mean, and that's the thing about like a situation like this. The reason that it's so potent is because people feel inherent and intrinsic compassion for each other. We love each other across humanity and want to do right by each other. And when you're told something wrong has happened to somebody and you can make it better by buying this tote bag, it's like, sure, I'll buy a tote bag.
Exactly. Yeah.
You tell me I can sleep at night if I buy this tote bag? That's great.
Exactly. Yes. I can feel better. I can feel better myself because I bought this tote bag that has these rescue dogs on it. That's all right. That's a human truth there. So.
Alex, fire your Marvel question.
Yeah. So before we get out of here, having these 2 books, you started on, you talk about doing some work with Steven Universe first. Then you have these 2 creator-owned books that we talked about. I also mentioned you worked on a comic in the larger Buffy series, also at Boom, the Vampire Slayer. But recently you've moved in and you've done some Marvel work. I know you did you contributed a couple short stories to some anthologies. There was the horror anthology, which
Crypt of Shadows.
Yes, Shadows. Yes. Was that a Moon Knight and
that was the Hulk and Kraven the Hunter.
Kraven. Okay. I'm thinking
and Werewolf by Night.
Okay.
And
Werewolf by Night.
What a combo. I had so much fun with that story.
That's a wild one. And then also, I guess as we're recording this 2024, last year's 2023 Marvel's Voices Pride issue, you had a story in there, the fantastically named Be Gay Do Crime, which was a Black Cat Gambit story. So you have a couple entries into Marvel there, and then you have this White Widow series, this Yelena Belova series, which as we're recording this now, the 4th and final issue is not out yet, but when this goes live, so if you're listening to this as it comes out, you should have yesterday on Wednesday bought White Widow issue 4. So it'll be out by then, and I look forward to reading that in my future as recording this, and your past as you're listening to this, I would have already read it. But I'm curious, what was that like moving into kind of the larger connected universe, but specifically working with a character in Yelena, who I think people know now. They have a wider knowledge of now, thanks to the MCU and Florence Pugh. I think she was so incredible in this character that really, I think even like you have to be like a hardcore Avenger head to really know who she really is. Because she doesn't. I think it's interesting that your book is kind of about her discovering who she is as a person, because so much of her time, she's been around since 1999. Do I have that right? I think somewhere in there. She's been around 25-ish years as a character.
Oh, don't tell me that 1999 was 25 years ago.
Yeah, I know that's
that
bad.
just hurt my heart.
Yeah. That
How does this happen every episode to us?
I don't know. I don't know.
We're like 2010. Yeah, it was a couple years ago.
I'll be honest. I only know that one because that was the year I graduated high school, and so I'm getting the emails from my school of like 25 years, and it's like, well, that's depressing. That's wildly depressing. But
well, they got to get you before you're dead.
I know Yelena's a character who, in her existence in Marvel Comics, has really only been defined by her relationship to Natasha Romanoff, the original Black Widow. She starts off as an antagonist and then like a reluctant ally, replacement Black Widow, the new Black Widow, to where she is now as like not a blood sister or closer to what they have in the MCU, a sister in arms, I think is what she refers to as. And that started in the Black Widow run written by Kelly Thompson that she did with Elena Casagrande and Rafael Della Torre, which is so good. And that's where the name White Widow comes from. So you're given this character who's never had a solo series under this new name, this new moniker, the White Widow, with a personality that doesn't quite really exist. And you've been tasked to find that and work with that. So what kind of runway did you have working with the editors at Marvel to find a voice for this character who said really in metatextual publication history and story history hasn't really had a story of their own before?
It was I think as much runway that they could give me. It felt like a very I was intimidated by the prospect of this because first of all, it's Marvel, right? And I had written a couple of shorts for them, but this is a much bigger project. And I was like, okay, I need to bring my full on A game. At the same time as this was happening, I haven't really spoken about this before. I was going through a pretty significant health crisis and was like, okay, gotta get my body and brain in shape to do a good job with this. And this ended up being my sole focus for some time, was just building out this character, her story, the world she's inhabiting, her goals, what she's driving toward. And I wrote an incredibly dry, very deeply traumatized character who really, based on a lot of my own life experience, is doing the thing of coming out of a very high control environment and a life in which all of her ideas and thoughts are very under lock and key, and starting the project of developing a sense of self. And it was so much fun to write, and I brought so much to the page. I think my first script was like 10,000 words long, not because of dialogue, but just with immense descriptions of characters and places and dynamics and letters and these like really thorough descriptions. And then I got to work with Alessandro Miracolo, who's the artist on this one. And Alessandro brought a sense of looseness and light and fun to the page that I had not envisioned and could not have imagined. And I remember when I first saw the inks for issue 1, I was like, oh, this character can be really fun. She can be really like funny and silly. And so I had initially this vision of this very dry character inhabiting a very fun and silly world, right? She lives in a small town where the local coffee shop, as of like issue 0, is called Beans and Jeans, and it's your local place to get coffee and raw denim. Yeah, and sure. I was like, what is this very serious, very dry person gonna experience this coffee shop as? And Alessandro drew this character who like very genuinely is like, no, I love beans and jeans. I love this combination. And it was so fun to evolve the scripts to kind of match that fun sensibility in the art.
That is legitimately blowing my mind, because the way the character reads, and I didn't want to seem insulting or patronizing, because the way the character reads feels like it has been in some ways influenced by what you see in the live action movies, and the way that you see the character as very dry, very sardonic, but often kind of like the straight man, like the person who doesn't get the jokes, but like knows they don't, like the idea of like not getting the metaphors or things like that. You saw that some in Kelly Thompson's run where she would say something very very, very straightforward, and characters around her being like is she joking or is she serious? And you don't know, and that's where the humor comes from. And so reading your White Widow series, I got that sense there that okay, this is the character evolving, and the way that she can be kind of funny and sardonic and sarcastic and things like that. But you're telling me that came from after you had written that first script, and as these scenes were coming back, that the character evolved based on what you were seeing in the art and some of the other things around it.
She evolved, I think, to be a lot funnier throughout these 4 issues. There's also an interesting challenge with her, which is that she is Russian, and important to me, and I clarified this early on when I took on the project, disavows Russian politics and Russian oligarchy, and is like not I was like, hey, just want to check in that we're not going to be reinforcing any like Russian propaganda efforts, right? And my editor Alana was like, no, calm down.
It's true for both Yelena and Natasha now. They have disavowed. They are no longer Russian in terms of identification. Yeah.
But she is Russian as an individual.
Yeah.
And she needs to have a Russian accent. And I have spent a good amount of time around people who speak Russian as a first language, and Yelena canonically is not interested in speaking unaccented English. She is very interested. She wants to retain her accent. She wants to retain her connection to her mother tongue. And so in writing her, I wanted to avoid a trap some writers have fallen into elsewhere with her of giving her a kind of cartoony accent, a little bit of like a Boris and Natasha accent.
In Soviet Russia, that kind of thing.
Exactly. Yeah. But it also needs to read as somebody who speaks English as a second language. And a lot of her literal humor and a lot of the jokes that she makes that involve literalism are English as a second language jokes, where she is playing with the language. She is enjoying knowing that this thing she's saying could be taken multiple different ways, and she's saying, I want it taken this way, and because that's funny to her intrinsically. And I think that, I don't know, I've heard from several people that she feels very MCU, and I think part of that is because she's funny. She, in some earlier of her story arcs, was not in as humorous a context. She was suffering quite a lot, and I was like, we were aging this, not aging it down. The rating, we wanted to have this be accessible for teen readers.
Okay, sure. Which makes sense.
Also, to hit that rating involves not including some of the content of her other arcs, which get quite adult in content.
Yeah, there's a lot of the kind of borderline the Max line, where things were intentionally more adult. That kind of where she came from, I believe. So
and so I think the combination of making her accessible to younger readers and putting her in a funnier context and making her a little bit more light has made a lot of readers connect her with Florence Pugh's, I think, iconic performance of her as Yelena, and that's fine with me. Like, I know that there are some Yelena fans who are very unhappy with that, and I feel for them, but it's also like,
don't tell me they're on the internet
to more readers. I know, on the internet.
Fans on the internet? What?
Never heard of that before.
I love how deeply invested people are in this character and how expressive they are of their investment. And also, if the thing that I wrote invites more people into this character and into loving her and into discovering more of her backstory, and reading back issues of her story and getting to know her life, I've done a good job.
Yeah, that is fantastic. The fish out of water thing, I think, works for that kind of little drier sardonic humor of it's observational, which does make me my last question about White Widow specifically. The gigantic board of the things that Yelena loves, likes, is neutral on, dislikes, and hates, which again is just you can stop on that page and you can't see every entry, but you can see a lot of them in there and see what falls under which category. And it's a great running gag as she goes to the town and experiences new things. You get the meter up there of, does she like this? Does she love it? And it's such a great fun visual gag, like in the middle of a fight. You get the same kind of meter up there, which every time it comes up, it's hysterical to me. How much fun was it to make that board and decide what goes on there? And again, did you make up and be like, this is why she would say this is something she loves, something she likes? Like, did you have a decision for her? Or was it just a matter of like listing funny stuff there? Or did you have in mind some idea of what Yelena was thinking?
So this is like a place where I think my one of the other people who obviously I think unavoidably influences my comics writing is Matt Fraction.
Yeah.
And I think that
Yes.
shows in this list specifically because I think Matt Fraction and I share the quality of loving a background gag.
Yeah.
I love a background gag, and this list is like the ultimate opportunity for one. At the same time, the thing she's doing is not she's not consciously doing it for this reason, but it's a dialectical behavioral therapy technique of learning to identify when things are pleasant, unpleasant, or neutral to you. Because learning to be able to just identify that and say it is part of learning to tolerate discomfort and learning to become comfortable with the fact that discomfort and survival can exist at the same time. So, for instance, I might say, like, I'm having some back pain right now. That's unpleasant. That doesn't mean I have to freak out and, shut down our interview and like go run into the other room screaming. It just means I have this happening in my life at the same time as this lovely, wonderful conversation. So Yelena is in the process of building a self and learning to make observations and decisions for herself and learning to hold her own opinions, is learning to say, here's some things that I don't like. And I can say that I don't like those things without having to kill them. And here's some things that I like. And I can say that I like those things without having to kill for them. And that's like a big thing for her.
Major step for a character like Yelena. Huge step.
Huge.
Yeah. Yeah.
Every item on this list was very intentionally chosen. Okay. There are some things that refer to her backstory, some things that refer to her comics backstory, some things that refer to her MCU backstory, in an effort to unite those ideas a little bit and say, these are the same character, and so those things can exist at the same time. She can hate things from her comics, and she can love things from her film appearances. And then I also threw a couple things in there just as treats for me, like her canonically hating Beats. I hate Beats, and I was like, you know what? Yelena hates Beats, and if you like Yelena, you have to agree with me.
Also, very very daring. A Russian not liking Beats. I mean, that's a daring choice for a Russian character to come out and say, like, you know what, Beats, no, don't like him. Don't like him.
That's her real tragic backstory.
Yeah,
is having been Russian and hating Beats.
Yeah. No borscht for her. So.
I did force myself to like them a few years ago because
How did you do it?
Well, I was vegetarian and I was like, I started with smoothies, and so I started I started juicing beets, and then I started smoothieing beets, and then I started roasting beets. It sounds like I was only eating beets. I was like dipping my toe in, like once a month I would try.
You were dipping your toe into a beet.
Yeah, no, it was a beet bath. It gives me my natural glow.
And, I was gonna say you really radiate beet energy.
Yeah.
It's golden beets. Yeah. They still taste like dirt, no matter what you do to them. But like
everyone
really
is like,
sweet
oh,
dirt.
You don't like beets. You don't like what if you roast it and you put it with goat cheese? I'm like, it tastes like a beet. You're not changing anything.
Yeah, it's just hard for some people to wrap their heads around not liking certain foods. Anyway, we've taken up far too much of your time, and I apologize for that, but am very grateful for your willingness to chat with us. Is there anything coming up other than White Widow that you can promote right now?
The only thing I can talk about is at my newsletter, Stone Soup. I just launched a new series. I run a series at Stone Soup every single year, which is a very like Capricorn thing for me to do. I'm very like, oh, I have to put structure on this newsletter that no one is in charge of except me. And this year I'm doing a series in which I interview the entire team behind a book. So, books, both novels and comics, are often represented by certain members of the team that creates them. The novels that I write, people will say this was made by Sarah Gailey. But the reality is that it's a collaboration the same way a comic book is. There's a huge team of people who make every single one of my novels happen, just like there's a huge team of people that make every single one of my comics happen. So I'm interviewing teams behind books. I just released the interview with the team behind The Woods All Black, which is the upcoming Lee Mandello book. It is stupendous. It's an Appalachian folk horror about a trans traveling nurse who comes to a small town in an Appalachian community and discovers that something dark is happening in the community. And I got to speak with the editor, the production editor, the cover designer, the assistant editor, and the marketing and publicity director. Oh, I hope that I'm remembering all of those right. I'm sure that I got one of the titles wrong, but
we'll clean it up in post-production.
Yeah.
Yeah. Just dub one of your voices over my voice.
Yeah, there is no post-production.
Right.
Yeah. No, I think we have enough data that AI will be able to do a decent rendering of your voice now.
And what could go wrong with giving AI the ability to reproduce my voice?
We all read Know Your Station, and clearly no problems with AI giving bad prompts to AI. No problems whatsoever. Yeah.
No problems ever.
Nothing bad comes from that.
So I've got a lineup of, I think I've got 10 more interviews coming this year, and some of them are with people who self-publish, some of them are with people who make graphic novels, some of them are with people who made novels in different genres. I think they're going to be really something cool. So I hope that your listeners will come and check that out.
That'd be great. Yeah. So where can they find that again? Where should they go to sign up for the newsletter?
So they can go to my website, www.sarahgailey.com, which has a link to the newsletter, or they can go directly to stone-soup.ghost.io, which is the long URL.
Right, yeah, but it'll be in the episode description of our episode, so people can just click on that, and while they're there, give us like a 5-star rating or whatever. I think that's the only option. I think it's 5 stars or nothing.
It really is.
Yeah, I think that is all you can do. Yeah.
And you say you're working on some comic stuff, but it's not in a position where you can announce it quite yet.
No, I can't say anything. I can just say that I have 5 projects currently in conversations. So
and you probably can't say if these are like for hire stuff or creator owned stuff. You probably can't hit on that either. I was going to say,
does one of the publishers rhyme with room?
I can't say anything, but I can say that hopefully everybody will keep on buying the comics I've already written, so that people will keep letting me make other ones.
Absolutely. If we can encourage anybody to do anything, go out, buy Sarah's books that have been on Boom, whether it's Vampire Slayer, Know Your Station, Eat the Rich, White Widow over at Marvel. Support the work, because if you've got 5 books in the hopper, then I need to read all 5 of those. So
one of them is just about butter.
Well, that's the first one I'm reading. Then that's.
I hope it. Yeah, it's just a visual appendix to this one chapter in another book. Just find a publisher for that.
They'll be lining up to publish it. Who wouldn't
beating down your door?
Absolutely,
more butter content.
There's a bidding war already.
Yeah. I think there will be a lot of churn in the industry as they try to get their hands on it. Yes. I'm trying not to get invited back.
No. So okay, so my definition of a pun is that it's not a pun unless someone in the room hates it. Like
yes.
Someone has to do what Alex did, which makes it.
And that person is always me, by the way.
It's always Alex. Yeah.
It's always me.
I've had to edit cricket sounds into the podcast when I feel like I've nailed one, and he will not look at me for 5 seconds.
Total no sell. Yeah. Total no sell on my part.
Brutal.
Yeah. But I got that. That was pretty good. I got it. That was pretty good.
Thank you.
It was stealth too. I wasn't it wasn't an obvious one. I wasn't expecting it. That kind of came out of nowhere. So that props for that.
Yeah, it just comes out of nowhere and creams you in.
I know, really.
Alex, I'm so sorry for like that.
I was like,
Okay,
yeah. Anyway, thank you so much for your time, and we will have links to all of their work, and we'll catch you after the podcast if you have a preferred store people shop at online. I assume you have at least one you prefer people not to purchase your work from. So we'll add some links for positive referrals, and we'll go from there. So thank you so much. Can't wait to see what you do next.
Thank you so much.
Thank you
Appreciate
so
it.
much for having me.